speaking of my good friend, he's on line one. Gary Palmer joins me on the show. I mentioned he is the he's the policy chair of the House Republican Caucus in the House of Representatives, and he is amongst the leadership in the Republican Party there. And obviously, the Republican Party has the majority in the House, and we're set to face the specter of another shutdown. To speak about this, Gary joins us on the show. Gary, thank you for being on with us. How are you?
I'm glad to be on with you, Matt. And I'm like you. I hope Nashville doesn't go the way of San Francisco. That'd be a national tragedy.
Well, it is, and sadly, we see so many of these communities, these cities, that are just in the death throes because of liberal policies and liberal politics. And I mean, man, you face it every day in Washington D.C., and you have to face a political party that seems to be willing to put America over the fire and watch it burn, so long as they come out on the winning side of things, which is it's dangerous to play chicken with somebody that's willing to wreck their car. You know what I mean?
I think we're dealing with people who want to wreck the car. You know, this has been going on for over 100 years, this idea that we need to ditch the Constitution, the progressive movement, whatever you want to call it, but it's really socialism. It may be a diluted form of communism, and I know that what I'm saying is a little provocative, but I really don't know how to explain what the left is doing when you have the energy policies that they've got, when they want to make us 100% reliant on China for our energy output, what they did on COVID and the control they try to exert over people. So I really, when you stop and ask yourself, why would somebody do that? I really don't have a good answer.
Well, it's troubling that we're fighting amongst ourselves when we have these people that seem to want to destroy the Constitution of the United States and the United States of America as we know it. As a consequence, they say the quiet part out loud now, Gary. I mean, Obama said that he wanted to transform America. Joe Biden's making no bones about it either, But talk to me a little about what's going on amongst the Republicans in the House of Representatives. I want to break this down and make sure that people understand the debate that's happening and the consequences of a variety of different options that are before us as we see the fiscal year coming to a close. Can you give us like a 50,000-foot overview to start?
Yeah, the appropriations process, first of all, a lot of people get confused and think that's the budget. The budget's where this starts. And I served on the budget committee for 4 years. That's where you lay out what you then send to the committees of jurisdiction, like the Committee on Armed Services or the Agriculture Committee. It's the amounts that they are to take up when they do their authorizations, and honestly, all appropriations should be authorized. In other words, they go through the vetting process through committee. It's what we've always called regular order. And then once the committees finish that work, they send the authorization bills to the Appropriations Committee. And, you know, you and I have talked about this before. One of the most prominent authorization bills is the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. That's one that most people are familiar with. But when that goes to the Appropriations Committee, they send it down to their subcommittees that, like the Subcommittee on Armed Services. They go through the debate process, allow both sides to offer amendments. Once it comes out of subcommittee, it goes full committee. The full committee gets an opportunity to offer amendments. And then when the full committee votes the bill out of committee, it goes to the Rules Committee, where everybody has a chance to offer amendments. And once that process is done, the bill goes to the floor, and that can take months to get done. So if you get off schedule, you're really messed up. So what we're going to face when we go back, I think we've got 4 bills. There's an agreement to bring 4 bills to the floor, but there's over 400 amendments.
And you have to go through those one by one under regular order.
Right. Now, some of them, the ones that are not controversial, can be all pulled into one group of amendments and voted on as a block, but the others have to be voted individually.
Isn't it something, and I've known you a long time, Gary, since before you were in Washington, D.C. as a House of Representatives member and long before you were head of the policy caucus or the policy committee. You've been arguing for regular order for a long time, right?
Yeah, and we finally got regular order.
And
so years under Pelosi, Matt, they were writing these bills in her office and bringing them to the floor.
So if this is the way the sausage is made appropriately, and this is what we want, then what is the debate amongst Republicans? Is it because we've got a time crunch in front of us? And if so, the big question is, how did that happen? What happened between, I don't know, June and now that created this compression of time? Why does that seem to happen almost annually?
Well, I think, and I'm thinking about bringing this up in our leadership meeting, is we might need to change how we do this legislation. And by that I mean the first bill, our H.R. 1 bill, was the Lowering Energy Cost Act. And it took weeks to get that bill out. And then the second one was the Secure the Border Act, which is in this 30-day funding bill for the government, includes that bill. So what's going on, I think, is that the committees have their top priority bills, and so they get to work on those, and sometimes the appropriation, the authorization process kind of gets pushed back. Now, in the state of Alabama, I don't know about the state legislature of Tennessee, but in Alabama, we have a law, as you know, that requires the budgets to be passed first, the appropriations and budgets bills to be passed first. Which they
never do, by the way. But
it's true, because they pass a budget isolation resolution and go on about and do other stuff. But still, I'm thinking we ought to make that a priority, is get that done first. And you could argue that maybe we shouldn't have taken the whole month of August off and stayed in Washington to get these done. You could make that argument. But here's the thing that's different now. When I first went to Congress, John Boehner was Speaker, and then, of course, Paul Ryan, and then we went into exile for 4 years under Pelosi. But if this were Boehner, we wouldn't even be discussing this. He would have cut a deal with Pelosi, gotten 20 or 30 Democrats, given them whatever they wanted, and we would be talking about an omnibus, which I have never voted for and will not vote for. But McCarthy has committed we will not do an omnibus. And so,
but isn't Gates, I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought there, but aren't people like Representative Matt Gates and maybe Congressman Andy Ogles? I don't put words in his mouth. I heard him this morning on Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis, but they're arguing that a continuing resolution would be, in effect, an omnibus.
No.
Tell me how they're different.
Well, in an omnibus, that's an agreement between the Republicans and the Democrats, and that's where you get a lot of your court money dumped in, particularly on the Senate side. And that the omnibus funds the government through the end of the fiscal year. That would go through September 30th of next year. What a continuing resolution does is it's only 30 days, and the particular one that we have funds the government for the next 30 days at the same level, but it also includes the Secure the Border Act. The only difference between the bill we passed earlier this year and what's in the CRs is it doesn't have the E-Verify in it, which was pretty much a consensus of everybody to leave that out. But this would be a bill that the Senate would have to take up and pass in order to keep the government funded, but it would also pass the Secure the Border Act.
Why wouldn't the Senate? Why wouldn't the Senate, even if you got it past the House, why wouldn't the Senate just not do it?
Well, if they didn't, then they'd be the ones that shut the government down, while also leaving the border open. And that's what that's what we ought to be talking about is the Senate would be willing to shut the government down but keep the border open, and we're trying to shut the border down and keep the government open.
Don't you feel like the Republicans are going to be blamed one way or the other? And the Democrats know that?
We always are. But they blame Donald Trump for everything, and he's up 9 points on Biden now. So,
well, I mean, I get that.
I can't worry about what the Democrats are going to do with their media allies in the mainstream media. We got to do what's best for the country, and we have to secure the border. And I think having it in the CR really puts it out there in full view of everyone. So I think we made a mistake in passing it as early as we did, because by now everybody's forgotten about it. This is an issue that even Democrats realize has become critical. So I think we put it out there, and hopefully we can get our colleagues, my colleagues in the House, to allow us to come to the floor and get it passed.
What can you accomplish with a continuing resolution that you couldn't accomplish simply by allowing the government to shut down on the 30th if you can't get your work done by then, and continuing to work to pass the 12 appropriation bills one by one to include border security? Could you not do it that way?
Well, if the government shut down, you're not paying your Border Patrol agents, and they could get furloughed, because the determination of who stays in at the job and those who don't is determined by the White House. And the Biden administration will do the absolute best they can to punish conservatives. So you could wind up with Border Patrol being furloughed or their staffing cut in half. That's the problem with the government shutdown. And I've gone through two of them, and if that's the way we're going to go, that's where we're going to go. But what the 30-day bill to fund the government does for you is it gives you the time then to finish the rest of your appropriations bills. And like I said, we're taking up 4, hopefully, this week. And we'll work through the weekend to get those out. And then try to get the other 8.
If you get those 4 appropriated, at least over to, well, I guess what happens, then you have to go to conference committee with the Senate because the money's not going to match, right?
Yeah, the Senate's already got, Schumer knows what he's going to do, and he thinks he's going to force McCarthy and us into doing some omnibus bills, and we're not going to do it. So if you get those, it shut down, if it gets shut down, it will be Schumer that shuts it down.
All right, hold on for just a moment. Gary Palmer's with us. I want him to hold his thought. Congressman Palmer's from the 6th Congressional District of Alabama, and for our purposes here in Middle Tennessee, more importantly, he is a part of the leadership team that is trying to formulate an action plan with many conservative holdouts in the Republican Party who do not want to see a continuing resolution. Gary is offering a counter argument as to why that is the best plan of action moving forward. It's two
stories coming up, 2:30, Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Thank you much, Mac Morey. It is 2:26. A few more moments with Gary Palmer, who is head of the policy committee for the Republican Party caucus in the House of Representatives and represents District Number 6 in the state of Alabama, and is a good friend and a good friend of the show. Gary, where do you think all of this goes? What's the plan from now until Friday in terms of meeting with some that are frustrated, don't want a continuing resolution in your own party, and seeing if there's a path forward? What's the game plan?
I think we're pretty close maybe on getting the continuing resolution. And for the record, for your listeners, I don't think I've ever voted for a continuing resolution because it's always been about a dollar value. This one's different because it has the Secure the Border Act in it. So it's not just a continuing resolution. And I think the arguments over and this is congressional speak, but what the top line number is, and I think we're pretty close on that. So, and I've been working, talking to different members about how to get that number down to where our folks can support it.
For those saying no CR, and they're being pretty emphatic about it, what do you think they need in order to move on that? Because, I listened to Congressman Tim Burchett, who's from here in Tennessee. He just says, no, let's balance the budget. It's time to break the cycle. You're a physical hawk, Gary. I know you a long time, but I what exactly changes them from a no CR to agreeing to vote on the CR, or do you know yet?
Well, there's not enough time before the end of the fiscal year to do what some of them want to do. So
well, I don't understand what, and I don't mean to necessarily speak for them, but why do you not then just shut it down, accept the consequences of the shutdown, recognizing that time was wasted? You mentioned the recess. Perhaps there was not an anticipation that there would be this level of infighting, but that's water under the bridge. Why not accept that you get done what you possibly can get done, let the government shut down, compelling the House to work even harder and faster to get the bills passed that we need to fund government?
Well, first of all, when they talk about a balanced budget, the Budget Committee, I think, has a legitimate budget that balances in 10 years. You're not going to get to a balanced budget in 1 year without enormous pain. And I'm talking about for everybody. But we can get to a balanced budget. And I've been working on that with the Budget Chairman, Jody Arrington from Texas. We can also get our debt to GDP back down to a manageable level, but that's going to take 14 or 15 years. There's a way to do it. What we're talking about is not a budget. It's appropriations. And what we're trying to do is come in below what's been spent before. And the arguments over the discretionary part of the budget, almost 70% of I said budget, 70% of our funding goes for entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and interest on the debt. Only about 30% or less is even discretionary, and where we're moving would cut that by about 7 to 8%. So we're reducing spending. But again, when we get back to a CR, this is not a typical continuing resolution because it's legislative in the sense that it forces the Senate to consider our bill to secure the border. And that's what I'm trying to get across to people, but it also addresses spending, but just for 30 days.
I mean, but do you really believe that? I mean, because it seems, hearing you, and maybe I'm mishearing, but if you get the CR done and you get the border security bill to the Senate, the government will still shut down because the Senate will not consider it, but it places the blame on the Democrats at that point. Do you think that will resonate with the American people?
I do, because of the border. I mean, you've got Democrats out there now. The mayor of Dallas just switched to the Republican Party. You've got the Democrat mayor of El Paso who is publicly saying the administration has done nothing to help them, and they're in a crisis mode. You've got you had AOC and Gerald Nadler and some of the other Democrats tried to hold a press conference outside the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City where they're processing the immigrants, and they got shouted down. People are fed up. They're scared to death of what's coming across the border, and they should be. This is the issue. Now, we've got to secure the border, and I think the bill that we have that will force Schumer to decide between shutting down the government or shutting down the border, I think that's one that we can win. But if we pass appropriations bills that balance the budget this year, it will never pass the Senate.
Okay, and I just want to make sure, and I'm running late, and Mac Morris needs to do the news, but just to make sure that people understand, the suggestion is to give the House 30 more days to pass the individual appropriations. You're not going to bundle them. You're going to pass them individually. And in the meantime, you're going to kick one of the appropriations to the Senate that includes the border security. That includes the CR. Here's the thing. If it's not really a continuing resolution, it's just giving you more time. Is there any other thing we can call it? Because I think that is frustrating people because we've seen these continuing resolutions for so many years.
Yeah, we're having that discussion on the floor. I've had a number of members come to me and say, why can't we call it something else? And I said, we can. It is a legislative bill. It's not your typical continuing resolution. because it includes the legislation to secure the border. It is totally different from any other CR that I've been a part of since I've been there. And like I said, I don't think I've ever voted for a continuing resolution.
Well, it's one of the reasons I appreciate talking with you, because I know you're a fiscal hawk. I know that it bothers you, the overspending. I also understand where you are in terms of attempting to talk to rank and file in favor of trying to come to some sort of compromise with the leadership. Gary, thank you for your time today, and we'll do it again very soon.